Oh, John.
This is the regular town board meeting for March 10th at 6 o'clock. There are going to be a few things done a little bit differently tonight, partly because Elizabeth Spinzy is out ill. I had less than an hour's notice that I was going to be running this meeting, so if I blunder, be patient and be kind, and I would ask my colleagues to stop me if they see me starting to do that. Please join me for the pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first thing I am going to do in the nature of unusual things, and there's a particular reason for it, which Warren will explain a little later, is instead of waiting until the end of the meeting and keeping him here until then for something that's very brief, we're going to go into executive session now. I don't think it'll be more than 5 minutes. So please excuse us. We will be right back. Report on what we just did in the session. It's been pointed out to me that I forgot to ask for a motion and a second to go into executive session. Warren has said to me that I should ask for it now. Nunc pro tunc, a phrase that I slightly remember from law school, but I could not define for you. But the context will make it clear, I'm sure. May I have a motion? Nunc pro tunc, executive session.
Second.
Could you frame
Any
that?
comments, questions, other?
Could you frame that with wording under the open meetings law, please?
Under the, pardon me?
With wording under the open meetings law. In other words, you went into executive session.
Retroactively, you should have announced that.
I know the reasons.
Oh, for litigation.
Oh, litigation.
I'm going to tell the board, I'm going to tell the
Which
public.
you're going to get the case.
You're going to hear all about it right now.
Thank you.
Any other
Not all
questions or
of it.
comments, preferably not from the
A
floor?
little bit.
No? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Warren?
Okay, just to make it clear, the board did go into executive session to take a vote pursuant to the provisions of town law, I think it's 64, if I remember correctly. Let's see. 65 of the town law to join in a litigation which will be filed in Supreme Court, Dutchess County, against the town of Hyde Park and the town of Clinton and other possible respondents, defendants, because it's going to be a hybrid Article 78 petition, basically challenging the recent enactment of Local Law Number 1 of 2025 in Hyde Park, which will permit the development of a project which would otherwise be prohibited in the town of Hyde Park, adjacent to Route 9G in close proximity to Rhinebeck. And the reason the town board is joining in this lawsuit is because the town board feels that the project will have a detrimental impact on the citizens of Rhinebeck as well as the citizens of the town of Clinton and the town of Hyde Park, and is violative of several provisions of New York State decisional and statutory law, and violation of the seeker regulations in that there was no environmental review of the project and on other grounds. That's all I can reveal at this time because the lawsuit hasn't been filed. But the town has to pass a resolution joining that lawsuit as party plaintiff, and at that time that would be made public.
Any questions from the board or others? No?
What is local law number 1 in Hyde Park?
It's a local law. It's very complicated, but basically the law circumvents, in our opinion, the provisions of the town of Clinton, town of Hyde Park zoning code, which prohibits the access over town of Clinton property to an adjoining property in the town of, which prohibits the access over the Hyde Park property to the adjoining town of Clinton for a use which is not permissible in the town of Clinton by virtue of its zoning code. That's,
But in short, what
and this local law that they passed circumvents that, and we feel that it was done improperly.
But in short, what does their law say?
Their law,
Yeah.
you can't describe it in short. It basically says that allows any person to access a development in an adjoining municipality which is otherwise prohibited in the town of Hyde Park, and circumvents the zoning law provisions of the town of Hyde Park and the decisional law in the state of New York. That's all I can
And
report.
they didn't do seeker. They did not do
I can,
seeker.
if you want, I can send you a copy of local law number 1.
Thank you.
Now,
But they
rather
didn't,
than trying to explain it,
but they didn't do seeker.
they very
Sketchy,
superficially.
sketchy seeker.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Let's move on to approval of prior minutes. Minutes for meeting of February 24th. May I have a motion?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any comments or corrections or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Passed. Committee reports and liaison reports. Tomorrow there will be in Morton Library a discussion starting at 6 o'clock, really a presentation with regard to proposed changes in the hamlet with regard to parking and other things. It's an important meeting for the hamlet and would encourage everybody to attend. As always, we want to remind everybody that all dogs harbored in Rhinebeck have to have a license. And we're also happy to announce that our Historic and Archaeological Preservation Committee has produced a handbook that we discussed at a meeting perhaps a month ago or 6 weeks ago. That was, in my opinion, and I said so at the time, just a gorgeous piece of work. In connection with that, there will be an award presented by the New York State Planning Federation Board at our meeting on April 7th, acknowledging the contributions of that handbook to the virtues of historic preservation. Resolutions. Tab 1, resolution number 089 for this year, requesting home rule legislation in the New York State Legislature, authorizing the town of Rhinebeck to enact local legislation imposing an occupancy tax within the town of Rhinebeck. And I'll ask Warren to describe that briefly for you. Well, I guess I need to ask for a vote. Motion?
I motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you. Discussion. Warren?
So the town board of the town of Rhinebeck has decided that it would be in the town's best interest to impose a what we call a bed tax or occupancy tax on hotels, motels, and short-term rentals. Many other municipalities in New York State have done that, and the tax would be 3%. The way to have it done would be by special legislation of the state legislators. So we are taking the first step, or the town board is taking the first step in that process tonight by passing this resolution. Once that is passed, that will be sent on to Hinchy's office, and we'll be working with people at Hinchy's office to then process the legislation process through the state. I don't know how long it will take, but we will keep the public and the town board informed of that process.
Any questions or comments from the board?
No.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No,
None?
that should be roll call.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Warren. Dana?
Aye.
Chad?
Aye.
I vote aye.
Aye.
Alan? Aye. Thanks, Mark. Before we go on to the next scheduled tab 2 item, I want to go down to the discussion items because we might like Warren's participation depending on things that might come up. The first item is with regard to questions following or occurring during the March 4th Town Board Community Gathering in the Hamlet with regard primarily to the parking and traffic pattern changes that I referred to earlier that are proposed or being considered for the Hamlet. And in the course of that, we did get some questions about workforce housing. So that's the first item under our questions from March 4. Did anybody want to follow up on that in any way? Okay.
Oh,
No?
I think we already, it was already determined, if someone's salary increases beyond the limits set for eligibility, then that person has to move
That was
out.
absolutely raised at the meeting, and yes, Warren?
To be honest, I don't know the answer to that.
Oh,
I
okay.
was just faced with that question tonight. It's something that I will take up with the developer who knows more about the process and how the eligibility requirements will be enforced after the workforce housing development is passed and built. So I will take that up with should have an answer or some answer to the question at the next town board meeting.
Excuse me, is that determined by the developer, or is it a law or regulation?
The law, as we formulated it here for the workforce housing, does not deal with what's going to happen in the future as to how it's going to be administrated and eligibility and how it will continue in the future. We'll have language in the local law requiring that, and that'll be consistent with the provisions of our workforce housing and affordable housing law. But I don't have an answer for you yet as to how that's going to be administered going forward. It's nothing we're going to tackle in depth in our phase of the project at this point. But I can speak with the developer who's done a number of these to find out what happens in that event of somebody increasing substantially their income.
Thank you.
My favorite example is somebody qualifies and then hits the lottery.
Yeah.
Happens all the time.
Anything else?
Can I just note that the developer gave Elizabeth a summary list of the rules and how that all works. It's not appropriate for us to share that. I think, but Elizabeth has that from the developer. It's short and sweet.
Good.
It explains that.
Yeah.
Good.
I think, Dana, you were copied on that, by the way.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I saw some traffic on that today, so I think that, what happened.
All right, so we've begun the process and we'll get answers for you. Anything else on the workforce housing questions? The next item is strategies for attracting more volunteer fire personnel. I do recall that being discussed at the meeting on the 4th. I don't recall any particulars, but anybody have anything they want to ask about or add? David?
I actually, the following night, there was at Star Library a meeting where we had the opportunity to hear from village candidates. Lydia Slaby, Gary and Rick were also there. And I mentioned it as a question, how do they feel about the sustainability of the Rhinebeck Village Fire Department based on what we know from Hillside and Gary seemed to feel that they were getting volunteers at every age level and that he doesn't really, Alan, you were there, right?
Yeah,
That he
that's
doesn't,
exactly what he said.
he's not really that concerned about the sustainability right now of the village fire department in Rhinebeck.
Anything to add, Alan?
No, that's pretty
That's
good
good.
summary.
That's good news.
I mean, basically, the town contracts with fire departments to cover that part of the town that's not in a fire district or in the village. And for the most part, the village fire department covers most of the town as well. So I think that'll continue.
All right, the last item coming out of the March 4th discussion is this one, Planning Board and Zoning Process Committee. I don't know, I assume Elizabeth added this to the agenda. I don't know what she had in mind. Can anybody help?
Well, I mean, basically, we have a committee that we put together that Dana and I are on, that'll include Melody, who's here, to look at the processes that the planning and zoning operation uses to make sure they're streamlined and effective and efficient. So we'll go through it. Yes, so we're just going to go through it. We haven't met yet, so it's hard to say much more than that.
All right, thank you. Anything on that from anybody?
No.
All right, I think we've exhausted our need for Warren. Does anybody see anything on the agenda that's a mistake? I'm sorry?
I thought that was inexhaustible.
Okay, go take a rest.
Thank you,
Good
Warren.
night, everybody.
Thanks, good night.
I can back up Johnson. I
Yes,
did have
please.
the answers right here in front of me, but I forgot that I had them about the eligibility that was provided by the developer. Their feedback.
Okay.
So, obviously, initially, you have to pass the needs test to be able to get the unit. After initial certification, they have to recertify every year to ascertain if they continue to be income eligible for the unit they occupy. If a tenant's income increases to a level that exceeds the maximum income for that unit, the tenant will be certified to a higher income unit, and they will pay the higher rent associated with that unit. Their lower income bracket will then become available to an existing tenant whose income may have decreased, or possibly a new move-in from the wait list. So this is next available unit rule. Now, if a tenant's income increases to a point that is 140% above all or various income levels, right? So there is a little bit of wiggle room around the income testing. Then the tenant's notified that their unit will be charged the market rate for that unit. So we have to talk to them about that because obviously, you know, that's,
Yeah, so they're not evicted, they're just charged market rate.
right, but that's not what the.
So that's the starting point in trying to answer this question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that was what they said, so that's what we're going back on, and obviously there are things there that we would want to change about that response.
And the thing that you just read came from
Carney.
Carney, the developer.
Yeah, the other thing there is how frequently is the mean income or the median income that they're comparing to determined.
Right, I mean, I would assume that that's got to be like a floating bracket, right? Like whatever they define in the paperwork has got to be tied to current CPI or something like that. But, you know, obviously you want to have some kind of bracket around that to not kick people out of their home if they fall slightly above, but letting someone graduate to market rate, that's not something we can have happening across the whole development.
Yeah.
So that's something we're going to have to.
Okay, so it's a beginning. Thank you. All right, let's go to tab 2, resolution 090 for this year. Renewing a contract with Alta Planning and Design Incorporated for a trail feasibility study. We had done a significant amount of work before the COVID pandemic began, but didn't finish the work under that contract. As I recall, it's in 3 phases, and we had done phase 1 and phase 2, but not phase 3 when we called a halt to everything. We have a remaining amount from the original budget of almost $18,890, but the cost has gone up significantly. And to the extent that in order to complete the feasibility study, we need to increase the budget by $35,000 to a total cost to complete of almost $54,000. This is partly inflation, of course, but also I suspect, and Dana might know more about this than I do because she's been active on it even from long before she came onto the board. I suspect that phases 1, and this is speculation, so Dana, please correct me if you need to. I suspect that we learned things in phases 1 and 2 that made phase 3 a lot bigger deal and more expensive, but that's my guess.
That's part of it, and an additional part of it is that when this project was picked up, It was earlier on in the cycle of NYSDOT taking on these kinds of projects, and some of the projects continue to move forward. Some feedback came in from those projects, and now New York State DOT is saying, actually, we want wider pathways. So instead of 8 feet, we want 10 feet,
Oh,
right?
boy.
So that's a big part of it, that physically changes the lines for how far this project goes. And it kind of, we're no longer just talking about right-of-way, we're going to have an additional taking of about a foot. So that becomes way more complicated, and that's driving this increase in
Yeah.
cost. Now, obviously, we could sit here and say with hindsight, gosh, I wish we hadn't put it down and we just pushed through before DOT revised things. But silver linings, when this was originally going forward, we also didn't really know what Locust Hill was or how many, we had no idea of what that gravitational pull of that point would be. And now we know it's going to be pretty important. We're going to have a lot of people who are really going to benefit from this pathway, and we can kind of change how the path goes so that we can take advantage of serving those folks there. And I think we've also gotten a lot of input too. I know when I was campaigning, I talked to a lot of folks from the gardens who were very excited about this project. So I think some amount of time has gone by. The loss is the increase in budget, but the gain is we can plan better around Locust Hill. So.
Yeah.
Great. Anything else from anybody? Did I ask for a motion? Ball under number 7.
I'll move.
Have a motion, have a second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes, thank you.
Okay.
With regard to tab 3, this regard is in regard to the community choice aggregate problem that we've discussed, I believe it was just 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
We have a proposed contract extension resolution in today's materials. We received mid-afternoon today a follow-up communication from the provider, and there just hasn't been time to analyze it, figure. I couldn't tell in the very little bit of time I had whether it would become an addendum to what we have here, it would become an addendum to the existing contract. And my proposal, unless somebody knows enough about what's going on, would be that we table this. They've asked us to get back to them by March 21st, which is the Friday before our next board meeting, which is on that Monday. I imagine we could get a brief extension, and maybe we can deal with this at our meeting on the 24th. If not, I would suggest that we'd have a special meeting in the interim to do what we have to do, whatever we decide to do. Did anybody have any kind of different take on that? I don't know if everybody even got the thing.
I got it, but I think Elizabeth has a much better grasp, and we
She
should wait
does.
for her to get
She
back.
does.
I mean, it's really dealing with an extension of the contract through a period of time
Right.
to wait further, but I think we should table it till later, let that happen before the meeting on the 21st.
Joan, do I need a motion to table? Okay,
Sure.
okay. Bob?
Quick question, please. I read the contract. It says direct energy. Is that Joule? Because there's no mention of Joule.
That's true, I didn't see one either. Okay, that's the first question. Thank you.
We'll put that into negotiation or
Yeah,
But it's capitalized, like a company.
yeah, Joule, J-O-U-L-E, I
But it's
think.
not mentioned. I was just curious. Is
Okay.
it Joule?
Thank you. Good question. Anything else, anybody? Do I have a second to the motion to table?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Actually, I have a question, or is that not allowed because we just motioned?
Yes, it's allowed.
So, and I'm sorry, because I didn't see this, it came in this afternoon, but we were going to do the extension because the volatility was making it too expensive.
That's right.
Too expensive
Yeah.
to sign up for a new thing, right? And now it's more volatile, so there's not new pricing. So I have to imagine we would need the extension regardless, right?
We were.
Oh, I
yeah.
think so.
Yeah,
But-
that's what this is moving toward.
Yeah.
That's what this is moving toward, but right now, without Elizabeth being here to be able to advise on
Okay,
the
okay,
progress.
all right.
So we're
Okay,
in the midst of just gonna,
Sure.
a little delay on.
all right, so
till then.
aye.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion passes. Thank you.
But it's a Joule.
We have a resolution to number 92 with regard to the appointment of a dog control officer and a deputy dog control officer. The resolution, if passed, will authorize the hiring of a woman named Leslie Hill as the dog control officer and Patricia Wind as the deputy dog control officer. Ms. Hill will receive a yearly stipend of $6,000, as will Patricia Wyndham. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Motion, second. Any discussion, comments, questions?
I just want to thank them both for stepping forward as members of the Rhinebeck town and doing this. We've been needing it for several months, and it's still needed. So I want to thank them both for doing it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, pass.
All in favor, or did we do that? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Did you vote?
Yes,
No?
I
Thank you.
did. I voted yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm just confused, because there's another.
We've learned, for the first time, at least during my time on the board, that we may occasionally need somebody at our meetings to provide sign language translation. And our next resolution, 094, will authorize, Joan, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, you skipped 093?
I think it's a duplicate.
Tab
No.
No,
5.
it's not a duplicate.
Tab 5.
No, that's in part.
That's the one we tabled. Maybe we didn't vote on it.
No, that's
No,
not the
table
one. we
CCA.
tabled.
There's
Tab
dog
five.
control
Tab five.
and deputy dog. They're two separate resolutions, is that?
No.
what-
Tab
No?
5.
There is our dog control, but then there's also
Red
an IMA
Okay,
with
one
Red Hook
second, 1 second.
to share the dog control.
We had two resolutions under tab 5?
No.
No,
So,
This is dealing with Red, having Red Oak come in and
We'll
help
talk
coordinate
about this
this dog control issue as part of the town.
To share our dog control.
Yeah.
oh, I see. All right, all right.
Now that
Thank you.
we have officers, we can do something,
Gotcha.
we need Red Oak to participate.
Thanks, Joan. All right. 093, we'll do this work jointly with Red Hook.
Motion.
Motion, second.
Second.
Discussion, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks again, Joan.
Sure.
Okay. Back to the sign language issue. We have before us a resolution to make an arrangement with a service providing on relatively short notice for sign language interpretation as needed. May I have a motion?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? None? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None? Thank you. Resolution 095, authorizing the town supervisor to execute an undertaking with the New York State Department of Transportation. This is with regard to work that our highway department occasionally has to do in or around a highway or a state right-of-way. And when we do that, the state, understandably enough, wants us to undertake to do it well, do it responsibly, restore the site, and to provide an undertaking to do all of that. And that is what this resolution will authorize. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Got a motion, I have a second. Any questions or comments, folks? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion passes. We are in need of a full-time clerk in the bookkeeping office. We've had a resignation as a result of family tragedy. So if we pass this resolution, we will authorize the creation, quote, of a full-time position within the bookkeeper's office with a title to be determined after consultation with Dutchess County personnel and to advertise for and interview prospective hires. May I have a motion?
Motion.
A second?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None? Thank you. The motion passes. Resolution 097. From time to time, we are required to file, by the general municipal law, an annual financial statement with the state comptroller. We're supposed to do it within 90 days at the close of our fiscal year. We need a little more time this year. We're asking for a 30-day extension, and may I have a motion?
Motion.
Have a second? Second. Thank you. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? None? Nobody votes against it? Thank you. We apparently have, I've never heard this term before, down at the pool, an equalizer tank, which needs to be relined. So Resolution 098 is for the repair of an equalizer tank with, well, repair of the lining of the equalizer tank. The cost is not to exceed just under $11,800. May I have a motion? Motion Dana, second. Alan, thank you. Questions or comments? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Thank you. Resolution 99 will authorize our business office to pay our current debt obligations, which are at about $91,000. The vouchers and materials supporting them have been reviewed and approved by the town board. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Second. Any questions or comments? Or all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. No one opposed? Thank you. We have a much smaller item with regard to a capital project. We need to approve the payment of just over $625 to engineers Cog and Bond in connection with some work we are doing with them with regard to water. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, coming to our last item before adjournment, public comment on non-agenda items. Anything? Huh?
Well, I have a comment on an agenda item. It gets back to the Alta Planning Trail feasibility study. I read the contract and it makes mention of a website where all this information is made available. Where's the website?
That's a great question. I'll dig that out and I'll forward it to you, because I think we also need to update it, because when they put that up, that was even before we kind of selected which of various routes, so there's updated stuff to go up there.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody else? Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Dana made the motion,
Motion, yes.
and Chad seconded. Thank you, meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Good job, Chauncey.
Thank you for your tolerance.
Julie's direct energy.